Hi, everyone. This is Josh Nelson from Keystone Financial Services. We will get started here in about 5 minutes or so. Glad you are here. Hi, everyone. This is Josh Nelson again. I can see a few people have signed in here right at 11:30 as well. So glad that you're able to join us today. I appreciate you tuning in. I'm going to go ahead and put myself up on camera so you can see me. That's a little bit more fun. There I am. So welcome today. We're enjoying talking about retirement. And for years, one of the topics that people have asked for the most is not just the financial aspects of retirement, but how to do it successfully. All the other things that people don't think about, like longevity and healthcare, those are big, big topics that people are wondering about in managing their retirement, not just their finances, but their life. So today we're going to talk through a number of different things that relate to finance and relate just to life stuff and go through that together. So a couple of features that I'll make sure that you know about. We've got a chat box and we've got a questions box inside GoToWebinar. So for those of you who are tuning in live, you are lucky enough to be able to interact with me and ask questions along the way. So please keep it interactive. If you've got stuff you want me to cover or slow down or go back to, please use that. Again, there's a questions box and a chat box, which you can feel free to use. So I'm going to take myself off of camera here in a few minutes, but I did want to point out that we do recorded versions of these as well. So this is being recorded and will be available after the presentation. We actually find that more of our clients and prospective clients end up watching the recorded version than the live version, so that'll be available as well. Say if you've got a spouse or a coworker or a friend that you think that should have been attending today or just couldn't because they had meetings or something else, they certainly can attend. Also, more and more what we're finding is that people want to help their kids out, and they want to help their kids and their grandkids even start to learn about money, learn about finances. And that's also one of the reasons why we do these, because it's an opportunity to educate them as well. A retirement seminar, is that for them? Maybe. They might be able to pick up some principles. But this fall, we're excited because we're actually doing a series that will be geared more towards what we would call next gen. That would be the emerging wealth category, people that maybe are just starting out or just starting to build up their wealth and make some decisions about their finances. It may not be age specific to a certain group, but yeah, it would tend to be people that are just starting out and trying to lay down that financial foundation. So keep an eye out for those as well. Again, for those of you who have signed in after the half hour here, just make sure that you understand we've got a chat feature and a questions feature, and we will do our best to monitor that throughout the presentation. That's one of the things that as an advisor I've always enjoyed and I've really emphasized over the years is making sure that I'm giving people plenty of educational opportunities to be able to learn about the market, learn about investments and their money and how they can make better choices. So I hope that I've been able to do at least a small part of that for you as well. Many of you have shared that that's a big part, and I enjoy the educational component to my job, that's for sure. All right, I'm going to take myself off of webcam and start the presentation part of this today. Again, I'm Josh Nelson. I'm a certified financial planner, CFP. When people are looking for a financial advisor, there's a few things that they should check off the list for sure when they're trying to compare advisors. One of those is look for a CFP, look for a certified financial planner. It means that that person is board certified, and there are educational requirements, time requirements, experience requirements. They have to go in. There's also ethical requirements that they are accountable to. So always look for somebody who's a CFP. Also look for somebody who's independent, so you know that they are not working for somebody else. You want somebody who's working for you. You want somebody that you're paying them, and their job is to look out for you, not for what their company tells them that they should sell. And finally, you want to make sure that they're a fiduciary, which, believe it or not, all advisors are not required to be fiduciaries. We are, and I have been for years, in the sense that we actually have opted in, to that. We're required, by regulatory agencies to follow certain things, but being a fiduciary, we have a higher standard, meaning that we're legally required to look out for your best interest and put that ahead of anything that would be associated with me or my firm or anything else. So keep that in mind. Those are some big differentiators. And then, one bonus, certainly, that's a big deal is what is that person or that firm delivering for you? And I'm proud of the fact that we've always been comprehensive in nature, meaning that the planning that we do is not just about the market and investing. It's about retirement planning, Social Security, Medicare, taxes, estate planning, all the different areas that could be impacting your family, your retirement, your well-being, and ultimately that peace of mind that you've got financial security and that you can go live your life and not have to worry about this stuff. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started. Again, living in retirement, financial health and independence. And financial independence, I think, is really important to think about that as a different component than the word retirement. And I've spoken about this before, that retirement is just the point where you stop working. Basically, it's the point where maybe you don't go to work every day, and that can be a different number or a different year that it would apply to than somebody who maybe amassed the amount of wealth that they would need to be able to retire. I've got plenty of clients that are still working, in other words, that are financially independent, and they continue to work because they enjoy it. They enjoy the interaction, they enjoy the challenge, they may just enjoy the interaction with their coworkers and teams and things like that. They're just not ready at this point to retire. So I always have that goal in mind with my clients, whether they're 25 or 55 or 75, is that the goal is to get to financial independence so work becomes a choice. Today we're going to talk about the 4 challenges to your income in retirement. And if you think about investing, really the only reason to invest is to produce income. It may be income in the future, and that's the case, of course, during our working years as we're trying to accumulate a mass of money, an amount of money that would be able to generate income once we retire, once we don't have the income from work that's been providing our financial security along the way. We've got a pot of money now that we can draw off of. The 3 stages of spending in retirement, factors to consider, and then how to reduce financial stress. And I can tell you that that's one of the things, especially over time. I've worked with some of my clients for 20 years, a long, long time. And people share with me, especially over time, they share with me, you know what, the reason why I use you, the reason why I work with you, and more often than not, it's because of that the 4th bullet point there, is that it helps reduce my financial stress, makes me feel financially secure. It makes me be able to go live my life and not have to worry about this stuff because I'm just not wanting to do that. So that's one thing to keep in mind, is that sometimes it is the intangibles. Sometimes there's things like that we can help alleviate and certainly help avoid any real, financial security issues like making a big mistake somewhere in retirement. So the top 4 challenges: market volatility, spending behavior, taxes and inflation, and longevity. We're going to go through each one of these today. And these are the big 4 that tends to be on people's minds and the real challenges when it comes to retirement. So let's go over the 3 stages. Early, 80% or more of pre-retirement income is needed during ages 60 to 74. I can tell you that's just a broad range. I've had clients retire when they're 50. I've had clients retire when they're 75. So it can be anywhere in there that somebody might retire. But thinking of it in terms of pre-retirement income, one thing to keep in mind is that somebody, again, might be financially independent and still choose to work. So it could be that people basically have a pre-retirement income and have work income. They may have Social Security, other sources in there. As far as that early stage for you, it could depend on where you are. Leisure activities, certainly, that's a big one. One thing that it drives me crazy when I see some of these studies that come out from the big financial companies like Vanguard and Fidelity. Oftentimes they'll say, well, you don't need nearly as much money once you retire. You're not going to spend nearly as much money as you were when you were working. And I can tell you that, at least with my clients, is not always true. In fact, more often the case, people end up spending more money in their early retirement years because they're probably young and healthy, and they probably have kind of a pent-up bucket list, if that term's okay. Great movie a few years ago, Jack Nicholson. But thinking about that bucket list, and that people probably have had some dreams, some things that they've wanted to retire for. Otherwise, why would you retire, right? So people tend to have some things that they really want to do more than going to work, and that stuff oftentimes costs money. Think travel. You could also be thinking about things like gifting, like spending time with people. Could be leisure activities like golf, or it could be things like skiing, maybe more of that, things that are not cheap hobbies exactly. And then it's really important to be cautious of overspending because of that, because people, again, they've got kind of this pent up bucket list and they want to be able to go out and spend money. And it's very, very important that we're controlling that, because one thing I can tell you that is the determinant of whether somebody is going to be wealthy or maintain their wealth over time, the biggest factor is whether they're living below their means or not. And what I mean by that is that whatever income is coming in, or whatever reasonable amount of income can be pulled from an investment portfolio, that's our job to help people figure that out. Because if we invade the nest egg and invade it too much, especially during those early years, it'll have big implications later on. We'll talk about longevity in a little bit here. Very, very important, especially with some of the advancements in medicine and health that are coming down the pike here. It's pretty staggering to think about the stuff that they're going to be able to do for us that will not only increase our life expectancy, but will increase our quality of life during that time. So very important that we're thinking about not just those early years, whereas 50 years ago, if somebody retired in their 60s or 70s, they didn't have a lot to plan for because people's life expectancy wasn't that much longer. People probably retired because they had to physically, and they didn't have a lot of money, but they didn't need it. In a lot of cases, they just didn't need a lot of money because they didn't have a lot of time or activities to plan for them. So in the mid stages, that would be, again, the age 75 to 84 could be different for some of the people, but spending tends to level off after that first 10 to 15 years. That is what I tend to see, is that people kind of get a lot of the bucket list stuff taken care of. Unfortunately, in that mid stage too, people oftentimes will have health issues that start to come up, and it might start to limit activities, particularly travel. That's a big one that oftentimes I can tell as clients get older, they'll start, easing back on the travel, maybe not doing as much aggressive travel like international travel. But you never know. Some of my clients end up going a long time, and they end up having a number of years that they end up doing some heavy, heavy travel, as long as their health is holding out. Downsizing a home, again, that could happen at any stage, but that does tend to happen, is that people are starting to think about, really, do we want to still be in this home? They start to think about which home is going to be the forever home that I'm going to be able to get around. If somebody had a home that they had with their kids earlier on, they might have a lot of stairs. And as people get older, they tend to not like stairs any more than they did before. And so it's a good idea to start thinking about, when I'm 10, 20, 30 years older than I am right now, is this home still going to work out? Because later on, maybe not wanting to move and do a lot of work to change residence. Also, we'll find that people will start to change the nature of the home that they live in, and that it may not be the big home that fit all the kids, and they say that they want to go to something that's more of a lock and leave type property where they don't have to take care of the outside of the house. It might also be in a retirement community with other people that are retired, which has a couple of benefits. Number one, again, you have people that are taking care of stuff for you, but the other benefit is that you've got the social aspect to it, that you've got other people that are kind of in that same stage of life. Some people love that, some people hate it, and that's just really going to be up to you. In other words, sometimes people say, I don't like to be, in a place where it's all retired people. I like to see kids running around. And some other people really like it because they say, no, that's great. I've got lots of people that aren't working, and I can go play golf with, tennis, whatever it is that you like to do. So be thinking about that. Your housing might change, and of course that has financial implications. One other big thing that I tend to find is that when people haven't done a lot of research and they tell me, well, Josh, we're thinking about downsizing, I can tell you that if they really end up doing that, they find out that it actually ends up costing them the same or more to buy that next house than the one that they've been living in. And the misconception, I think, from a lot of people is that, well, if I downsize, if I go to a smaller number of square feet, that's going to all this money. I've even had people tell me, "Oh, Josh, this is going to be great because I'll sell my house. I'll be able to give you more money to invest and build up my retirement nest egg." And the fact is that just doesn't happen. The reality is that people end up spending more, and the reason why is the smaller number of square feet doesn't necessarily mean a lower priced house, because it might be in a nicer neighborhood. It might be in a neighborhood that has more amenities like a pool or a golf course or something like that. And the reality is people start to look at the home and they say, yeah, that would be really nice, but we'd like to put in some granite countertops, and we'd like to put in a hot tub and put in some nice landscaping. And before you know it, it costs the same, if not more. So moving is not cheap. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do it, but you need to look at the financial implications before you move. I've had a number of clients that have looked into the financial implications and how it's going to affect the rest of their choices, like travel, and they say, maybe not. In the same token, we've been able to find some creative ways that have allowed people to do both. So one thing to keep in mind, again, housing. And then late stages, 85 plus, again, this is subjective. I've got clients in their 90s that still live at home and still are actually very healthy, driving, things like that. So I don't want to generalize too much here. But one thing to keep in mind is that spending does tend to pick up at that point. And you probably have guessed it, it's because of healthcare. It's because of medical expenses tend to go up at that point. People tend to start to need more help at that point, where even if they are living in their home, they're probably not mowing their lawn or taking care of the landscaping, things like that. They might have somebody cleaning if they didn't before. It might even mean that people are using a home health care service and then ultimately looking into some type of retirement living. So medical expenses are a big deal. Independent living, I'll throw that out, that independent living is different than other types of long-term care. And the independent living may just be that you're living in a retirement community, whether that being in an apartment style, or it could be even in townhomes or something like that. But it could be independent living where there's some level of help that people are getting without it being full-blown medical care. That being said, of course, we could go into a whole seminar, and we've done that in the past, about long-term care expenses. And true long-term care, like assisted living or nursing home, that can get catastrophically expensive. And again, a whole different presentation that we could focus on that. But it's a real thing, expensive when it comes to long-term care planning. So let's look at some other factors. The probability of a 65-year-old in good health living to various ages. I'm sure you've seen studies on this before. It's thrown around a lot, as far as life expectations. And here in Colorado, we tend to take a little bit better care of ourselves, so from a lifestyle standpoint, maybe our numbers are a little bit higher than some of these. But average for somebody who's 65 right now, male, about a 50% chance that they'll live to 84 or beyond, which you think, wow, 84, that's not very old. It's actually, it's fairly old when you think of it as an average, though. When you think of it as that 50% of the people will be living beyond that point. And for females, it's 84.3. As well. It's basically the same thing, a little bit higher for females, but those numbers have narrowed at this point. Married couple, I can tell you that there's a 45% chance, and for many of my clients, this is really the biggie, because just because somebody passes away doesn't necessarily mean that the surviving spouse is going to be chopping their expenses in half. In fact, a lot of times they end up spending just as much, if not more, because of needing more help. So with a married couple, probability that one spouse will live past 90 is 45%. That's a lot of people going to be running around in their 90s. And then probability that one spouse will live to 95 plus, 18%. Again, a lot of people that are going to be running around at 95 plus. And it's the implications of that are staggering, especially when you think about the advancements in medicine and healthcare. And think about, for example, how many people right now have been faced with cancer. Many of my clients have had some type of cancer, but it's been treatable, and in some cases been able to wipe it out, and they go on and live much longer after that point. 50 years ago, a lot of those people would not have made it. I can tell you, my dad had open heart surgery to repair some heart valves here a few years ago, and that's scary stuff, right? It's still scary stuff, but the odds of making it through that are pretty high right now. 50, 60, 70 years ago, no chance. You would just die. Basically, there wouldn't be an opportunity to even do that kind of surgery. So, but think about the future. Think about the fact that they're not that far off right now from being able to clone our organs, generate new organs that will extend life for people that might have ended up being on waiting lists or maybe not be a candidate normally. They may be a candidate for some type of a transplant in the future, again, that can extend life. Of course, a big one is lifestyle and happiness. Happiness, is a huge one as far as socialization and being around family, friends, other people that love, that person. That actually is the number one determinant of life expectancy, is having that socialization. So, but lifestyle is also important. Of course, drinking in moderation and smoking and exercise, all that kind of comes into the mix. So, thinking about balance of portfolio, when we think about risk tolerance and investment objectives, there's a couple of things that you need to keep in mind. We all should keep in mind. This isn't just for retirees. One of those is that risk tolerance is very subjective, and we've got tools and we've got different questions that we'll ask to try to, kind of measure people's risk tolerance. But at the end of the day, risk tolerance is very much individual, in that you could be 90 and have a very high risk tolerance. You could be 20 and have a very low risk tolerance. In fact, I've seen a number of studies and read a number of interviews with people that are younger, in that next generation in their 20s and 30s, that saw their parents go through the financial crisis and have sworn off risk. They've sworn off anything associated with risk with their investments. They don't want to own stocks. They don't want to own real estate. They don't want to own anything that, had risk associated with it. So just because somebody is younger doesn't necessarily mean that their risk tolerance is going to be lower. Ultimately, it is going to come down to risk tolerance. And then the other big one is your investment objective. So thinking about, why is that money there to begin with? So investment objective for a retirement standpoint might be very different from one person versus another. We have some clients that their investments, their nest egg, really is just intended to cover certain expenses like travel, for example, or the fun stuff, gifting, things like that they have the opportunity to do because they may have other income sources. They may have Social Security. They might have PARA. They might have a company pension that they were eligible for before. And again, in some circumstances, people actually do work part-time in retirement as well. So for some clients, it could just be a supplement to their budget. For other clients, it may be all of their budget. Basically, they might be eligible for a very small amount of Social Security, and then investment objective for them is going to be the heavy lifting on the portfolio. They're going to need to be much more thoughtful about how their portfolio is allocated and then how much they're drawing out of it each year. I can tell you it also reverses the engines when it's about accumulating the money for retirement in the first place. Very important to think about time horizon, for example. How much time is it until I'm going to start using this money? And once I start using the money, how many years am I going to draw that money out? So a big misconception is that if you're retiring soon, you should stick it all in conservative investments because you can't afford to lose any money. Okay, I get that. But look at it from a longevity standpoint. What we visited about before with longevity, if somebody is retiring at 60 or 65, there's pretty good odds, especially if it's a couple, there's pretty good odds that one of those spouses is going to make it past age 90. And so we might end up having a very, very long-term time horizon for that money. One important perspective to look at, though, is that we're probably not going to go all or nothing. We're probably not going to stick it all in super conservative investments or all in super aggressive investments. If you think of it kind of beyond your bank, you should always have some money in the bank for emergencies and short-term expenses. On average, depends on the client, their preferences, but on average, I expect that people are going to have somewhere between 3 to 6 months worth of living expenses in cash just for unexpected stuff that could come up. Some clients will go up to a year even of money in cash, and that's where they feel their financial security by having that, knowing that if things got really bad, they wouldn't have to touch their investment money for 3 months, 6 months, or a year. So beyond that, to oversimplify, but kind of look at it as two buckets. Everybody's going to have a security bucket, and they're going to have a growth bucket. And their security bucket is going to be the stuff that tends to not go down at all, or it might go down a smaller amount during some type of a pullback. And that's important because right now things are pretty sunny. I think, when it comes to the market and the economy, things are pretty darn sunny right now. And we know that that will not last. There's going to be a point in time, and it may be a couple of years down the road from right now, but there is going to be a point in time that we go into either a slowdown or even a recession, or, some people are prognosticating that the 2020s are going to be really bad because of all the bills that we have yet to pay as a country, at least in the U.S., because of our debt levels and unfunded promises, essentially in the form of Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, that things are going to come to a head. Our debt levels are going to get out of control. Of course, you could bring in another economist that would say something completely the opposite, right? But it's important to recognize that that is one thing for sure, is that things will slow down and be tough at some point. So we've got to have some money in that security bucket, especially for shorter term money. And then the other pot of money is going to be that growth bucket. And that would be things like stocks, real estate, things that are longer term investments that certainly can lose more value in the short term, but that's where the growth engine is going to come from. Unless you are extraordinarily wealthy, it's going to be very difficult for you to be able to retire over a long period of time by just having that security bucket as your investment portfolio. So risk factors, ability to generate earnings. The big thing again is income. Thinking about your investments as income. Don't think of it just as the market or investments or mutual funds or index funds. Sometimes we get a little bit too close to things and forget about what the whole point was. So generating earnings, generating income is the number one objective of investing, and making sure you've got that balanced. So the other thing is balancing that risk and reward side of things. And I can tell you again, it's going to depend on the individual. It's going to depend on their time frame. So just copying your neighbor, not a good idea. It's also not a great idea to just invest in a cookie cutter model portfolio. And what I mean by that is that there are investments out there, usually they're called target date funds or something, some variation of that. And what it is it's essentially just a set it and forget it type of portfolio, which can be a really good low cost option to invest. But it usually targets people based off of age. And again, based on what I said before, I've been doing this long enough that I can tell you that age isn't necessarily a deciding factor on how much risk somebody is comfortable with or how much they should be taking in their portfolio. So those end up being very cookie cutter portfolios. And then it's just a matter of luck whether that ends up being a good portfolio for you. Excuse me. Getting checkups is important, and that's a hallmark of what we do as financial advisors, as we do a regular review with our clients. And it's important that we're looking at not just the investments, but we're looking at other factors. Estate planning documents are a big one that I find more often than not, either people don't have any estate documents, or it could be that they're really out of date. They could just be really old. So you may have done a will or other estate documents 20, 30 years ago and say, no, you got a will, which is awesome, actually. You're among the 30% of the population that's done any kind of estate planning. Most people haven't done anything. So good for you if you've made some moves. But if they're old, there are reasons why you might want to update those and have an estate planning discussion. Here's why, kind of the more recent things that if your documents were older than certain dates, you'd need to have them looked at. One of them is HIPAA regulations. So HIPAA regulations were basically before 2003, a lot of estate planning documents did not reference HIPAA. And HIPAA relates to our health information, our medical information, and the privacy of that, which is great. Obviously, I think we all want to keep our stuff private, unless we choose to release it. So not a bad thing necessarily. But if your estate documents don't reference that, there could be a huge impact going forward as far as your heirs or your loved ones be able to access information or make choices for you with your medical directives. January 2005, there was a tax bill that passed, and it drastically increased the amount of assets that are able to be tax-free. Now, as of the tax bill, we've seen that jump up even further. So you may have had some particular things thrown into the estate documents to try to avoid the estate tax. if you're on this call and you actually have an estate tax problem, I want to talk to you. It means that you probably have over individually either more than a $11 million estate or a $22 million estate if you're married. So again, call me. But most of my clients are not in that situation. Most people are not subject to any kind of estate or inheritance tax. So keep that in mind. So those things have jumped up the estate tax exemption, and the whole point of that was that when estate planning was done before, really that was why people did it, was because they wanted to avoid having to pay the government any extra when they died. Now, for most people, that's not an issue. The other thing that happened in January 2013 is it did update some stuff as far as couples that would have been using the opportunity to take advantage of, again, what's right now $11 million each. Now that's actually been equaled out, where they've got some language written into the law so people don't end up missing out on their full exemption amount. There's another one, doing a family meeting. We've done that several times with clients. Certainly up to you how we would do that, but having the talk with your children. No, it's not the talk that you had, when they were 8, 9, 10, 11 years old. Whenever you've had that talk, this is the talk with adult children. And the important part of that is really making sure that not only did they know what the plan is, but also that they know the particulars as far as what they would need to do. The reason why it's important that they know there's a plan is that on their mind, if you haven't brought it up, I guarantee you that they've thought about it. I guarantee that they've thought at some point, well, gosh, what if something happened to mom? What if something happened to mom and dad? If they've lived any life at this point, they know people pass away, and they probably have known people personally, like grandparents or friends or others that have passed away. And maybe they've even heard some horror stories about somebody settling their estate and having all kinds of problems. Now, one that was recent is Prince, right? Prince passed away, and he was among the 70%, unfortunately, among the 70% of people who did not do any kind of estate planning. And so he was considered intestate. That means that he didn't have any estate documents, and ultimately the state of Minnesota, that's where he lives, so the state of Minnesota would have had a set of directives that would have said where the money would go. So it's much better to actually make those wishes known by having it in the estate documents, and it's important that the kids know a few things. Number one, they need to know where your documents are and have access to those documents. Important to think about because, number one, they need to know where they are, but number two, they need to have access. Oftentimes what I'll find is that I ask clients where their estate documents are, and they'll say, well, they're at the First National Bank in a safe deposit box. And then I ask them, do your kids have access to that safe deposit box? And they say, well, no, they're not on the box. They don't have a key. They don't have any access. And when people need to access estate documents, oftentimes they need to access them very quickly, especially when it might involve a power of attorney or any kind of medical directives. They would need to be able to access them quickly. Other people might say, well, it's in the safe in the basement, and it's in a fireproof safe, so they're safe, right? But did the kids get the combination? Did the kids have access to that, or even your spouse, for that matter? Make sure that they know how to get into that. So if something were to happen, you've got access to them. It could be at an attorney's office. Maybe you had an attorney that drafted the documents, and the attorney is holding on to those. Very important to make sure that the kids actually know, though, where they are, or your spouse, or whoever it is that's going to be helping you out. Make sure they understand your wishes. Make sure they know at least generally what the game plan is. I can tell you, I'm honored to have people tell me this, but I can tell you that the vast majority of my clients tell me that, Josh, we've told our kids if something happens to us, they come to you. They come to you because you know where everything is. You've got copies of the estate documents. You know what we wanted. You know what our plan is, and we know that you're going to help them out. So again, I'm honored to be able to serve in that role and to be able to help spouses, kids when the person passes away. But very important that they understand at least the general game plan, or who should I talk to? Who's the attorney? Who's the financial advisor? And because we spend a lot of time helping people get organized and getting all the information together, we oftentimes are that point of contact here at Keystone. And then awareness of advance directives. Make sure that they're aware that you even have advance directives. And what I'm talking about is, something like a living will or a do not resuscitate, or a medical power of attorney that would give somebody the ability to get medical records or to be able to, make some medical decisions if necessary. So making them aware of what kind of estate planning that you've done. Power of attorney, there's lots of different powers of attorney. Basically, a power of attorney, and I'm not an attorney, by the way, I'm not a lawyer, but what these documents do is essentially it gives people the ability to act on your behalf. They're able to get information or even to make decisions in a lot of cases. Kind of think of it as like they're standing in for you because you yourself are not able to do that. So what we're not dealing with here is somebody passing away. A power of attorney deals with somebody who's still living, but for whatever reason needs help, or maybe they're incapacitated to the point where they can't make decisions from a healthcare perspective or from a financial perspective. There's different terms in here. General power of attorney, special power of attorney, these all deal with different aspects of your life, and it may allow somebody to be able to do something for you. So commonly we would find that people would name, if they're married, they would commonly name each other, and then they would have a secondary person that they've named. It could be a family member, maybe not, maybe it's a close friend, it could be somebody else that they would name. But that power of attorney will be standing in on their behalf if the bills needed to be paid, if the investments needed to be, decided on, things like that, in the absence of people being able to make that decision. One important part about that as well is thinking about, back to those age groups we talked about before, thinking about not just your capacity right now, but thinking about the future and thinking about the fact that as people age, the odds do increase, that not just somebody passing away, but the odds of their health deteriorating does go up. And so the importance of these documents goes up and up. As people get older, it's more and more likely that they would be needed. And it's not easy to get without going to court. It's not easy to get these documents generated unless you get a court order. And oftentimes what I find, the objective or the objection from getting their estate documents done, some people say, it's too expensive. I just don't want to spend that kind of money to meet with an attorney and get these documents drafted. But if you know how much attorneys get paid by the hour, especially if they're in court, it's going to go a lot higher than what your estate documents are probably going to cost. So it's a good idea to be proactive, do the work up front, make the investment so all this is nailed down, not only because of the cost, but also because of the turmoil that it can put people in, not just a spouse, but also other people in your family if they're having to deal with your stuff. You don't want to be a burden. Nobody wants that. I don't want that. I would never want to be a burden on spouse, kids, anything like that. I've even done planning for my business, and I've done a succession plan that's written and executable if something were to happen to me that would allow, for my business to continue to operate, my clients to be taken care of, my employees still to have jobs. So I've done planning on the business end as well to plan for what if something happens to me where I can't do the job anymore, or maybe I've passed away. Responsibilities of your executor. In Colorado, we call that a personal representative now, but executor or executrix, it used to be called if it was a female personal representative. Basically, it's the same thing. All those terms are interchangeable now. So this is somebody passing away, and they would name somebody in their will. In my will, I have a personal representative named, and I've got a secondary person if that person wasn't able to act. So the responsibilities there are handling your stuff once you've passed away. Anything that would be related to distributing assets and moving stuff around, paying bills and things like that, settling your estate, settling your affairs, your house, your property, all that stuff. That's what that personal representative or executor is named to do. So it's important that that's named. Sometimes people will also name co-executors or co-personal representatives. Sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work. You have to think about your family and think about the individuals and their likelihood to be able to get along. For example, if you've got 3 kids and, a couple of them, fight like crazy and can't, ever agree on anything, would it be a good idea to name the three of them where they all have to make decisions together? Maybe not. It might be a situation where you just have to pick somebody, and maybe it's not even one of the kids. Maybe it's you pick a sibling or somebody else that would take over and handle things. Again, in a marital situations, oftentimes you would name each other, that you would handle each other's stuff, but if both of you passed away, typically it would be a kid or another family member that would be named and would be handling your affairs upon you passing away. So thinking about your legacy, at the end of the day, there's a lot of things that you may want to pass on. One of those, of course, is your knowledge, and be able to, they oftentimes we'll call this a life estate, where, somebody actually will write down, they'll make videos, they'll make recordings, things like that. They'll give people access to their Facebook. This has become a thing, right, since social media started, making sure that people have access to their Facebook, because that may have had a lot of their thoughts, their videos, their pictures, things like that. So, certainly talents, as people, move on, especially into retirement, they'll tend to put a lot more effort and thought into helping other people out, helping organizations, helping the CSU, other places that they might be going in and volunteering. Financial resources, of course, we talked about that. And charitable giving, you have to think about charitable giving, or giving to anyone for that matter. Maybe it's humans, not a charity, but thinking about how would you want to do that? Would you want to be leaving a bunch of money at the end when you pass away? Or would you rather give some money away along the way? And I always have that conversation with clients, because by default, I think the default is that people just say, well, I'll leave people money at the end, when I pass away. But the reality is, oftentimes people's kids would be old too, right? If we're talking about you being in your 90s or beyond even, your kids are going to be old too, and they're probably financially independent and maybe even retired by that point as well. So when might they need more money, or could use more help, or would you be in a position to be able to see them enjoy that? Maybe earlier on, maybe it's something that you're helping out either with financial resources where you're gifting money. Maybe it's helping pay for education for a kid or a grandkid, and there's tax efficient ways to do that. So there's planning around all of this. But it's also thinking about, well, maybe there's some experiences, maybe there's some memories or moments that you can create through money. So many of my clients have maybe at various birthdays or anniversaries that they'll fund a trip. They'll fund some type of a big trip where they'll bring all the family, and they'll go to Disney World, or they'll go on an Alaska cruise, or maybe something smaller. Maybe it's just a big family get together up in Estes Park. So people, you may want to be thinking about that. You may want to think about what other people are doing as well to kind of trigger the things that might be important to you that you can look back on ultimately throughout your life, and know that you've got those memories and you shared those experiences along the way. So how can we help ultimately when you're dealing with a financial advisor, wealth planner? And, for those of you who are clients, this is important too, is to really think about making sure that you're using Keystone to its fullest extent, because I don't take it lightly that you're paying a lot of money to get advice and to have somebody be a steward of your wealth, your money, and your family's wealth and money. So make sure that you're not anxious, that you don't have a lot of stress. That's the number one thing that we're trying to avoid, is that we don't want people to be stressed. We want people to be confident. We want people to be happy throughout their retirement and not having to run around being stressed about their money. So if anything, that's what we can do, is we can alleviate that by being proactive in our planning to begin with, but also in helping people see things that they wouldn't see themselves. And we can address that before it becomes a big problem or making people lose sleep or something like that. So at every stage of people's lives, not just in retirement, there are different needs. And there's different actions that people should be taking if they want to be wealthy and be financially independent throughout their life. So we can certainly help being proactive, not only with you, but with your kids, your grandkids. We love that when we get to work with other family members as well. Managing and monitoring investment risk, back to those two buckets before, that security bucket and that growth bucket, that is critical. I was at a conference in February, and one of the the speakers was Ben Bernanke. So we're doing our halftime event tonight, and we'll be doing a recording, and we'll talk about Bernanke and some of the stuff that he said. It's important. He was the former Fed chairman, and he was actually, his doctoral thesis was on the Great Depression. So if we're thinking worst case scenarios of what happens when things go really bad, he's a good person to talk to. So we'll be talking about that. But he talked about asset allocation. He talked about where we are from a risk standpoint, and that's the number one determinant of anybody's financial success. Good reminder is asset allocation. And asset allocation is as simple as looking at how much do we have in the security bucket, how much do we have in the growth bucket, so what the proportion is for each person, and then thinking about the subcategories within those. Obviously, that's when we get into the weeds a little bit, and we love that, as financial advisors and planners, we love to get into the weeds, because we like it when things get complicated, and it's a challenge, right? So we get into the weeds and we figure out, well, within that growth bucket, how much do we have in real estate, how much in stocks, how much in different types of stocks, and so we can really mitigate a lot of risks. Diversification, not having all your eggs in one basket is key. Diversification will reduce your risk a lot more than it will reduce your returns. I can tell you that, is that diversification will never hurt you. Diversification can only help, and usually doesn't impact returns that greatly. Maximizing Social Security benefits is a biggie, making sure that your strategy is set up there. Typically, Social Security elections are irrevocable, at least after a period of time. There's nothing you can do to go back and change, and you don't want to leave money on the table. Very important that the collection strategy is done right and that you start collecting at the right ages for Social Security, where you could be leaving a lot of money on the table. Also, I skipped one there, inflation, taxes, healthcare costs. These things all need to be taken into account, and we do that with our clients, certainly when we're looking through retirement scenarios, when we're looking at somebody's overall financial situation. We want to look at it holistically and address everything. And then finally, the estate and tax planning strategies. Important that that's up to date. One thing to keep in mind is that estate planning is not for just rich people. Estate planning is for everybody. It doesn't matter if you're just starting out or you're 98 years old. Estate planning is important because of a couple things. Number one, we can pass away or become incapacitated at any time during our lives. But number two, it really, and I've seen this so many times in situations where somebody passes away or becoming incapacitated, where they don't even have to have much money for it to cause a lot of problems and cause people a lot of heartache and have to spend a lot of time and maybe even a lot of money. Maybe they end up spending a bunch on attorneys to try to fix stuff that wasn't done right to begin with. So very important that that's done proactively. Over time, that stuff becomes irrevocable. Certainly, once we get past tax years and trying to go back and fix stuff, or if it's estate stuff where people have passed away or already become incapacitated, then it's too late. At that point, it's too late to do much planning. So we want to be thoughtful about that. So with that in mind, I will open it up for any questions that you might have. And of course, that's always open to you. I have an open door, so you can always call me, email me, especially if it's a quick question. I can typically get back to you pretty quickly. But open it up for questions. We've got the questions box open and the chat box open. In the chat box, by the way, I did put our web address, www.keystonefinancial.org. And for those of you who are not clients right now, there's a link on there that says schedule an appointment right on the front page there. That's the easiest way to schedule an appointment because you actually get you access to my calendar and it lets you just set it yourself. You can just set it up and not have to play phone tag with anyone. Obviously, we'd love to talk to you too. If you want to call the office, you can do that. The other thing that you'll find on that page too is if there's any kind of anxiety about am I in the right investments right now or the right risk level, and certainly clients can use this tool as well. On the front page of the website, you can scan down and you can look on that page for a quiz. There's actually a risk tolerance quiz. It says client survey. Here's me again. There's a client survey on there that you can fill out. It takes less than 10 minutes, and we'll be able to give you a very quick assessment of if you're still in the right area from a risk perspective. We like to do reviews with our clients, and we meet with people once or twice a year typically to go over everything. And of course, we love to see you face to face, but that's another way you can get a double check. Or if you've got a coworker, you've got a family member or friend, somebody like that you know they need help, and you know that they're probably not fitting into one of those categories I mentioned before. Are they working with a fiduciary? Are they a CFP? Are they independent? Are they comprehensive? Are they covering everything? We want to make sure that people are getting a lot of value for what they're paying. And the role that I serve in people's lives is extremely important. I don't take it lightly, and I want people to be getting a massive amount of value for what they're paying us. The trick is that you pay the same thing, about the same thing anyway, depending on what advisor you go to. And oftentimes we find that people are not getting very much for what they're paying. So we want to make sure that we're delivering maximum value to our clients. So with that in mind, I don't see any questions in here right now. That doesn't mean that you can't ask them later, certainly. So you can shoot me an email at thejosh@keystonefinancial.org, call the office, and certainly, again, this is available for replay. So keep an eye out for this replay, also additional webinars that we're doing throughout the fall, and pass this on to other people if they need our help as well. That's all I need for today. Keep an eye out for Halftime 2018. We'll be doing that webinar shortly. And make sure that you're on our email list. If you're not getting emails from us right now, you can do that very easily by emailing me directly if you want to. I'll make sure you get on our list. Or again, go to the www.keystonefinancial.org, and there's a link right when you log in. There should be a link that pops up that asks if you want to be added to our newsletter list, and we'll make sure that you get our communications going forward. That's all I need. Thank you so much for your trust and for your time today, and I hope you all have a great weekend. Take care. Thank you.